Hey everyone, welcome back to Flow State Reactions. I am Starry and I am here yet again to react to The Lord of the Rings. This is the behind the scenes and this is the appendices for The Return of the King. Yes, we have moved on. We have graduated to yet another playlist for another movie. Okay, so I'm really excited about this. I actually I just finished watching the final parts of the Two Towers playlist, and then it just went right into like the intro for The Return of the King, so I stopped it. And now I have rewounded it. Only like about 10-15 seconds played. And so then we're gonna go ahead and watch this together, okay? All right, you guys, here we go. I'm excited. All right. So everybody relax. 1, 2, 3. Let's flow.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the appendices of The Return of the King. Just like the movies
Return of the King.
End, these appendices very much are the end of the making of documentaries.
Right.
By the time we came to finishing Return of the King, it was a time of complexity with the size of the film, with the complexity of the shots. It was a time of emotion with the farewells.
I'm trying to tell you.
That was the end. And for the first time in the journey of making Lord of the Rings,
I feel that way. I feel kind of like
it was the end, and it was tough.
Yeah. It is
On
tough.
this disc, there are documentaries totaling over 3 hours of running time. Now, as you probably know by now, if at any point you want to go back and look up something, look for other things to watch, you just return to the index. Treat it very much like...
I like how he's giving us direction of how to watch the films.
Documentary about an extraordinarily talented young filmmaker called Cameron Duncan. And Cameron's story is connected in a very special way to our journey of Return of the King.
Oh, really?
I'm sure we'll probably see each other again. You know, next time you see me in this chair,
highlighting
I'll
a new
be
director
a grey-haired old
for
man
you
for the 25th anniversary edition.
He said gray-haired old man.
Maybe there'll be something we can do sooner than that. But for the time being, this is the third of our
when I looked him up, he does have white hair,
really
like gray hair. And his face is slimmed down. Interesting. Very interesting. You know, it was startling because I'm looking at Peter as I forget that this was 20 years ago.
In Tolkien's youth, I think the only stable thing
but I still love
the trials of his early years was King Edward's School, Birmingham.
During his school days, as many students do, Tolkien developed very, very close friendships. With three friends in particular, Christopher Wiseman, G.B. Smith and Rob Gilson.
And Tolkien experienced a revelation of sorts. He realised that he wanted to become a poet. He realised that he wanted to be a creative writer. This really was the impetus behind the creation of Middle-earth. And the Council of London coincided with Tolkien inventing his first Elvish language.
He'd, up to this point, been studying Latin, Greek, Old English, all these Indo-European languages.
However, I think something which struck him like a bolt from the blue was picking up Charles Eliot's Finnish grammar while he was an undergraduate. Because this is a language which really is not at all like anything he'd come across before.
Your brain has to work completely different from most people's in order for you to be able to pick up languages like this. You know what I mean?
First Elvish language.
It's very interesting. You know, for your mind to work like that, and then for you to have the ear to be able to do that, and then to create your own language.
Intrigued by Welsh, a language which he learned much, and he produced another Elvish language, which is Sindarin, which in some ways is rather like Welsh in its phonetic structure.
You know?
So, by 1920, he's already got two fairly well-developed languages.
Did you say 1920?
And he wrote this sort of fantasy history to explain, you know, who's speaking these languages, why they're different from each other, how they've developed to the forms that he's given them.
And that is the beginning, the seed of the story which was to become the Silmarillion in the end. And this contains a history of the elves.
It's basically a fall from grace, a certain fall from grace. That is, the elves were put in the world to help fulfill its destiny.
But failed, ultimately, because they were too hungry for knowledge.
Oh,
So in the
interesting.
background of Tolkien's thinking was the Christian and Jewish story of Adam and Eve and their rebellion against God. This is reflected in the tales of Middle-earth, both in the elves and in the human races, particularly the stories of the destruction of Numenor, the island that was rather like Atlantis. It was destroyed as a consequence of human disobedience.
And in the end, the Numenorians, they set up an armada to invade the
Numenorians.
Undying Lands. And
That
take
is a
them
name
out
for you.
by force.
Numenorians.
Numenor is ultimately drowned by the wrath of God.
Only the faithful, those who had remained true, were rescued and saved.
Isildur, who is mentioned several times, and his father Elendil were among those survivors. And they came and they set up the kingdoms of Gondor in the south and Arnor in the north.
And it was from those people that Aragorn was descended, people who had already demonstrated that they had within them the power to be corrupted, to be flawed.
Aragorn has a lot of moments, there's a nagging doubt he has about his worthiness. He labors from the beginning with the fear he has that he's not going to be up to the task.
Why do you fear the past?
The same blood flows in my veins.
Aragorn,
Yeah, he was definitely
qualities of this
conflicted.
ancient civilization, when he was very aware of the problems of power and of misusing power and of being disobedient.
So here is Aragorn representing a race of people whose origin is gone, has been wiped from the face of the earth, is no more. Like Atlantis, it was sucked down into the depths of the ocean.
Wait, there was
Now,
no
the
one
concept
else
of being
from
overwhelmed by the sea is
Aragorn's
placed
people
in the
around?
book because
Just
of
him?
something that was very personal to Tolkien.
No.
From childhood, Tolkien recalled having a terrible nightmare, a recurrent dream of a great wave coming in over green fields, engulfing the land.
Now, in The Lord of the Rings, he actually gives this to Faramir. And Faramir is said to have this recurrent dream. In the movie, this is actually shifted and given to Éowyn.
I dreamed I saw a great wave climbing over green lands and above the hills.
Oh, interesting.
I stood upon the brink. It was utterly dark.
How do you guys feel about these changes when you read the books?
And the reason we gave it to
I wouldn't know
Éowyn
otherwise.
is simply because we wanted to use it. We couldn't find how to use it.
This will be interesting.
It's one of the examples of something that would have just stayed in the book and would never have seen the light of day, and was an incredibly important piece of personal information, I believe, from Professor Tolkien.
Okay.
All writers pour into their work
Yeah.
elements of themselves.
Mhm.
So, for example, when you look at the way in which he creates the people of Rohan, you feel instinctively this is a man who understood horses.
Before the war, Tolkien had joined something called King Edward's Horse. It was a battalion, and this was his first and his major experience of being around horses, and he seems to have shone.
Because the job that he got was breaking in the horses. And he was actually rather aggrieved about it, because no sooner had he broken in a horse and got it to do what it was supposed to do, than that horse was taken away and given to some other officer, and he was given another rookie horse.
This experience obviously shows that there's more than mere abstractions behind the whole idea of Rohan.
So the riders are an image of the Anglo-Saxons, not as they were, but as they might have been. And perhaps if they'd retained a little bit more of, as it were, rider culture, then they might not have lost at Hastings, and present English civilization would not have been as Frenchified as it has been. Something which Tolkien thought was
He said Frenchified.
disaster.
So the creation of the people of Rohan not only shows that Tolkien had an innate understanding of horses, but that he had the greatest respect and reverence for them. And this is something which comes from his experiences in the First World War. We have to remember that the First World War was the last of the great battles where people rode out with horses. It was the age when horsepower met machine power.
For Tolkien, the fact that machinery had entered warfare takes away any of that old romantic heroism. The nobility of warfare no longer exists once you're able to deal death at a distance.
Tolkien obviously experienced
deal death at a distance. What a way to put it.
in the First World War, and it left a profound impression on him.
The story he wrote straight after the Battle of the Somme was called The Fall of Gondolin, and it tells how a great and beautiful city of the elves is attacked by Morgoth.
And the force, of course, consists of orcs, yes, but also dragons, and also what look like tanks.
which, of course, Tolkien had seen on the Somme. Tanks were a secret weapon that made its debut there in September 1916.
And this sense of mechanization as being a force of war is something which carries through to the Lord of the Rings. You see it in the preparations that Saruman makes for war. You see it in the mechanical way in which the forces of Mordor march on the Alliance.
As he's writing the Lord of the Rings, you can sometimes see Tolkien, as it were, recycling earlier work. We have Gondolin and Gondor. They come from the same root in Elvish. And there's a sense also of the warfare of machine against wall. And you could say there's yet another connection.
Machine against wall.
Gondor and Gondolin are attempts to make things static. The elves have this urge to hang on to things and lock them into stasis. And you could say that the same thing in a way is true of Denethor. Gandalf asks him, "What do you want?" And he says, "I would have things the way they were, as in the times of my long fathers." And just like, as it were, the prehistoric elves, he won't accept any compromises. He'd rather die. In fact, he does rather die.
There is no victory.
I think one of the things that Tolkien realized quite early on, as he wrote the Lord of the Rings, was that it was going to be impossible to put into the book everything that was crowding into his mind. All the links and connections back to other stories and all the things he knew underpinned this great structure he was creating, he wanted to tell people.
He built things in at the start because he didn't know how it was going to finish. And then when it got to the end, he hadn't got space for them. Or he couldn't bring them in without spoiling the balance.
So he started developing this elaborate idea of creating appendices to the book.
The whole tale of Aragorn and Arwen is moved into an appendix. It clearly ought to be part of the story, but how are you going to tell it?
He did think about how he could work her into the body of the text and never found a satisfactory way of doing it.
It would have slowed the story down completely and been out of place.
But actually, Arwen is a very important figure because she introduces the theme of death.
The fact that Arwen casts off her immortality for the love of a mortal man is truly the greatest sacrifice in the entire story.
And perhaps one of the strange things there is that you can see Tolkien sympathizing very strongly with Arwen. He sees the story from her angle, perhaps even more than from Aragorn's. She wittingly chooses death, but she does that, really, out of love.
I choose a mortal life.
We do not realize just how significant and important this character is, but her relationship with Aragorn is absolutely central to how Aragorn behaves.
The condition that Elrond puts on Aragorn is that he may not have his daughter Arwen's hand in marriage until he defeats Sauron, essentially, and becomes king. And once he's earned that, then he's earned life.
Stories about a mortal and an immortal pairing, are there in the...
I remember that scene. It gave me chills. It's giving me chills now.
I think especially important to Tolkien. One of them is Aragorn and Arwen, but there are others back in his mythology. There's the union of Beren and Luthien. Luthien is a very high-ranking elf princess. Beren is a survivor from a human group which has been almost wiped out.
And Beren stumbles upon her while she's dancing in a woodland glade, and he's never seen anything so beautiful in his life, and his heart is struck still by the sight of her.
And her father, of course, has no intention of giving up his daughter to a ragged stranger from the wilderness, and a human at that.
This story not only was very important in the early tales of Middle-earth, but it had particular meaning for Tolkien in his life. As a young man, he'd fallen in love with Edith Bratt.
They fell in love, but Tolkien's guardian said he couldn't marry till he was 21.
And Tolkien, being the stubborn, pig-headed sort he was, waited till 1 minute after midnight on his 21st birthday and then wrote her a proposal of marriage and posted it. And she accepted it.
Wow.
Their love is something we know very little about, but we do know that he and his young wife took a walk in a wood that was filled with hemlock, and that she danced for him and sang for him.
What?
And that image, that very, very personal image of the woman he loved, became the image that he used to describe the meeting of Beren and Luthien.
Tolkien
Get out.
so closely with this story that when Edith died, he had the name Luthien written on her tombstone.
I think that's a great statement about his love for his wife. He felt that she, in a way, had given him something immensely precious.
That was so
which
touching.
He valued above everything else.
Some people say that he tended to stick women on pedestals, but I think if you read deeper,
dang, he was in love with her, huh?
The story of Luthien and Beren. You understand that it's about intimacy,
and for Tolkien, it really clearly was good. The central love at the heart of his work, his love for his wife.
I think her death shattered him.
Yeah.
Completely.
Love and loss are inextricably bound. For Tolkien to have lost Edith really was the end of his world in many ways.
Yeah.
And when he eventually himself died, the name Beren is on his stone. Beren and Luthien, Arwen and Aragorn, Ronald and Edith. In a way, they are all one and the same.
One very important aspect of the story of Beren and Luthien was the way that the lives of human beings and elves became intermingled, and the great significance of these stories.
I'm speechless on that one.
With his Christian belief in the ultimate incarnation, that God humbled himself and became a human being. In Tolkien's work, the elves represent perfection and the ideal qualities of human life, and so through the intermarriage of elves and human beings, their lives intermingle, resulting in a fuller humanity.
In their coming together, a part of the elves remains with us today and passes in to the bloodline of men, so that all is not lost.
We do have a glimpse of Eldarion, the son by Aragorn and Arwen, in this bloodline, this perfect mixture of elvenkind and mankind.
And from that point on, the divine and the human are intermingled. And so we have a much more intimate relationship with our Creator through that.
And if you look closely and listen closely, the music of Mozart, painting of Raphael, you can see it. The elves are still with us.
Tolkien structures the books in a very strange way, where he has these big chunks. Is not the intercutting, the tight cross-cutting that there is in the movies. It's just big blocks.
The way in which Tolkien writes means that he leapfrogs in his narrative. He tells you about one group of people, then he goes off and tells you about another.
But one of the effects of the kind of strand-by-strand narration of The Lord of the Rings is that the characters on any one strand don't know what's going on the other strands. And one of the most important cross-connecting devices is the Palantir.
And he installed them all around his realm as a way of communicating.
And the Palantir always tells you the truth, but it encourages you to draw the wrong conclusion from it. And I think they're used 4 times in the Lord of the Rings as a book. Next time is Pippin looking in it, and Sauron draws from this the wrong conclusion. He sees a hobbit in the Orthanc stone. He assumes that Saruman has the hobbit, and furthermore that the hobbit has the ring, so Saruman has the ring.
Which is the reason that Pippin must be removed to a place of safety, which is Minas Tirith.
Next time Sauron looks in it, he actually sees Aragorn.
Aragorn takes the Seeing Stone and he looks into it in order to draw the eye of Sauron. It's a tremendously brave act.
And Sauron, once again, draws the wrong conclusion, which is that Aragorn has the ring. Now, this
I forgot about that. I gotta watch these movies again.
One thing it does is to make Sauron strike too fast.
In the White Tower, Denethor also has a Palantir.
Do you think the eyes of the White Tower are blind? I have seen more than you know.
And if you check the dates, which I have, he's actually seen Frodo in the hands of Sauron, because Sauron has already captured Frodo. So Denethor looks in the Palantir, and like everybody else, he draws the wrong conclusion. So Sauron thinks Aragorn's got the ring. Denethor thinks Sauron's got the ring, and in fact, at that moment, Sam's got the ring, which nobody knows at all except Sam.
It's a very modern concept in a way. It's the concept of misinformation, and it so reflects how modern communication can give people a fraction of something, and by so doing, influence the way in which they react, the way in which they behave.
Right.
So the Palantir actually, just like the Mirror of Galadriel, is very dangerous as a guide to action.
You may not have enough knowledge to be able to have just that one bit of information that would totally transform your supposition about the way things are.
And I think, actually, that Tolkien had this in his head as a kind of infantryman slogan, because the infantryman slogan is, look to your front. If you start looking behind you and worrying about what your mates are doing, and they're looking at you and wondering what you're doing, then nobody is paying attention to what they should be doing.
Right.
So you have to slog on. The trouble with that, of course, is that you can very easily persuade yourself that things are going badly somewhere else, so there's no chance for you, so that you might as well give up. And once you've given up, of course, this prophecy is self-fulfilling.
Despair plays a huge part in the symbolism of Lord of the Rings, because it is the flip side of hope. And it's played out most obviously through the characters of Theoden.
Things look so bleak often in the Lord of the Rings.
Who lost their sons. Theoden has lost Theodred, and Denethor has lost Boromir.
They also both have surviving male heirs, but they don't regard them. Theoden doesn't regard Eomer, his nephew, as having any worth. Denethor doesn't regard Faramir, his son.
That's true, I didn't think about that.
You could draw this out. The parallels are really quite close. But actually, the thing is that they then take different routes.
Denethor has succumbed to despair. He has allowed his mind to become prey to the blackness that creeps out from the Dark Tower because he has looked into the Palantir.
Yeah, it looked hopeless.
He persuades himself. He knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Gondor is lost. There is no hope for men.
And
there
so
is
he
no
falls
hope.
into despair, and he ends up committing suicide, which is, you might say, the ultimate form of despair. Now, Theoden is heading the same way.
Theoden eventually manages to use the loss of his son as fuel to impel him into action.
And instead of succumbing to despair and just looking at the task that lies before him, this overwhelming army that they face at the Pelennor Fields, he rides to glory.
Right.
When it comes to it, there are more powerful things for him than despair, and one of them is the urge to live up to his ancestors.
To understand The Lord of the Rings, you have to understand something that was motivating Tolkien very strongly, which is that however dark and bad and terrible things seem, that there is a moment of turning, a moment when dark is turned to light.
Right, that's true.
When dawn dispels night. He called it the eucatastrophe.
And eucatastrophe is the sudden and unpredicted and unpredictable turn from bad to good.
Tolkien related eucatastrophe to the story of Christ, to the idea that out of the tragedy of the crucifixion could come salvation for all mankind.
And Tolkien finds it not only in the resurrection, but also powerfully in fairy tales.
Right.
Happily ever after is the ending of almost every fairy tale ever.
Right, that's true.
And he also said it's something that you experience in real life, but how rarely you experience it in the modern novel.
Right.
And in The Lord of the Rings, that is what you experience. At the crack of doom, when all seems to be at the point of potential failure, disaster has been reached,
right.
The corner is turned. The happy event ensues. This is where that eucatastrophe,
that was a
happy
triumphant
turn
moment.
of events, is played out. That is where good comes out of evil.
Right. That's so true. It was so powerful.
Friendship is one of the most powerful themes of the whole tale, and it must in some part hark back to Tolkien's lost friendships.
Tolkien's group of friends at school kind of formalised the bond between them in his final year as a school pupil at King Edward's School in Birmingham.
His literary friends.
And so they called themselves very grandly the Tea Club and Barovian Society.
The TCBS wanted to...
It's what every young person feels, that they stand at a point in life when they can change the world. But this same group of people were very soon to be sucked into the First World War.
Smith, who of course was the fellow poet in the TCBS, hugely appreciated what Tolkien was doing in writing the first poetry of what became Middle-earth. Tolkien sent poems that
writing
Smith
poetry
read
in the trenches. Right.
One night, Smith was about to head out on a patrol, and he wrote to Tolkien.
My chief consolation is that if I am scuppered tonight, there will still be left a member of the great TCBS to voice what I dreamed and what we all agreed upon. May God bless you, my dear John Ronald, and may you say the things I have tried to say, long after I am not there to say them, if such be my lot.
Clearly, Smith's encouragement, sealed by his death on the Somme in December 1916, must have been both an inspiration and something of a burden for Tolkien.
Yeah.
And in the subsequent conflicts, Tolkien lost all but one of those close friends. It was a loss that remained with him for his whole life.
Tolkien seems to have felt that he had inherited from the others their ambitions, and that it was up to him to fulfill them.
All hopes were pinned on Tolkien.
Right.
It was up to Ronald to bear the torch, to go forward.
But Tolkien had a recurrent fear, and the fear was that nobody was ever going to read his work. And it was actually a very well-justified fear. He was 62 when The Lord of the Rings did get published.
Okay.
And just about the time that the book came out in 1954, Tolkien wrote a letter in which he said that once upon a time, of course it's all he's given up on now, he did hope to create a mythology which other people would take over and could adapt and use.
He did it, though.
Going to create a kind of grand tapestry, and he would sketch out the myths.
I love that he tried, even though he didn't know. He didn't know the outcome.
And song.
But he says, well, my crest has fallen since, I haven't got such immense ambitions. But of course, actually, he could have had such immense ambitions because that's what's happened.
Right.
Lo and behold, he discovered he's got an audience of people who not only want to devour it, but want more.
Right.
Please give us more.
One of the surprising things about The Lord of the Rings is that although it's an English setting, it has an appeal throughout the world. And I think it must be because Tolkien is touching upon something that's central to who we are as human beings.
Right.
There's a hopefulness to the story and to life.
Okay.
That's what Tolkien's on about, too.
Yeah.
In your head and saying, well, I hand this to you now.
Right.
I hand the story to you that was handed to me. See what you can do with it.
I think Lewis said once that...
I'm so glad he saw it through to the end.
Everybody knew about, even if they couldn't remember ever reading or hearing any version of it.
Right.
And I think that's rather like that with Lord of the Rings. Everybody knows about it, even if they haven't read it. It's become part of the mental furniture of the culture.
Mental furniture.
That's exactly what happens.
The words that they use to describe what they are envisioning are just perfect.
It enables those works
Mental
to survive
furniture.
changes of opinion, changes of culture, of history, because each new generation of readers finds new meanings in it.
Right. Look at it. Look how happy he looks. I love that. Hold on. Is that it for this one? Thought it was longer than that. Okay. Yeah, we're going to stop it here. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. We're getting started. This is the beginning of the new Return of the King playlist. And in the beginning, we get to learn a little bit more about Tolkien and his process and everything. And I must say that one thing that stands out to me for this particular video is the fact that when his wife died, he put, what is it, Lothian? Or Luthien? I think it's Luthien. The name, I'll put it up. I'll find it and I'll put it up. The name that I'm trying to say on her tombstone, just to signify just how deeply in love he was with her. And then the other name was placed on his tombstone. Like that really stood out to me. Just the love that they had for each other. And it's like in direct because I just saw the behind the scenes appendices for the Two Towers for the last video, the Soundscapes of Middle-earth, and they were also in a cemetery, filming different sound effects in the cemetery, and it was just crazy how it just went right into another video of them being in the cemetery, but this time it had a different feel for me, where it was just like just really touching, just really heartwarming. Like, I wasn't expecting that. I'm sure someone has mentioned in the comments that over these months about his relationship with his wife and what happened and how it all came about, but I just don't remember that. It's a lot of information to take in, so I feel like this is the first time I'm hearing it, although it feels like such a significant thing that I should have actually heard it before. But I'm just saying that I'm sure you felt the same way. Like, that was really touching to me to discover, you know, that he had that type of love for her. And he waited until, like, what was it, midnight, 1 minute after midnight in order to propose to her. And then they got married and she was dancing for him. And, you know, just all of these things where, you know, he romanticizes these things in his writings, and it was his experience, you know. That type of love was his experience. So that's beautiful. You know, it's also interesting to me that not only was the making of the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, you know, a daunting task for Peter Jackson and the production team. And no one really knew, everybody was still so uncertain about the outcome of it, you know, if it's going to be successful, is it going to be well received. And even Tolkien had that in his mind the whole time as he's creating, you know, doing his writings. He was uncertain. Someone as remarkable as him, someone who has the intellectual aptitude to learn different languages and to create his own language and to do poetry while he's in the trenches, you know, and to just have the foresight of describing and creating, visualizing Middle-earth and elves and, you know, all of these fantastical things. He still had uncertainty in his heart about how it was going to all turn out. And even still, he forged through. You know what I mean? He forged through to get this done. So if it hadn't been for him and his tenacity and his hope, his dream, then we wouldn't have the Lord of the Rings. But I just think it's really interesting, you know, as a creative free spirit myself, where it's like everybody has that. If you have that in you, you have that, there's an uncertainty there, but you still, you just walk through it, you know, because it's just, it becomes enough just for you, right? Just the satisfaction of it coming through you becomes enough. So no matter what happens, once you release it to the world, it's okay. You have to make peace with that within your own self. And so I feel like that's what happened with Tolkien and then Peter Jackson and the production team and everything. Everybody you just get to a point to where, what did Peter say? You run out of time, but you also, you know, you make that peace within your own heart that you did everything that you could. And he did. And I loved it. So I'm excited to get on into this one. Of course, I'm looking at the playlist now, and it's going to be Building Middle-earth and Bigatures and What a Digital, all of those things, just like the other ones. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, let's flow.